Hi, my name is Justin, aka Ghost Reader, and today I'm going to be doing my wrap up for the month of April. As April comes to an end, I had a really good time with the books that I read, and so let's go ahead and jump right into it. And the first book that I read, and probably the best book that my favorite book of the month, was The Confessions of no, The History of the Ancient World, from the earliest account to the fall of Rome by Susan Wise Bauer. This book basically covers the history of this is a general survey of the world and the history that happened in parts of the world such as North Africa, mainly Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Middle East, uh, Asia Minor, Greece, Italy, basically in the Mediterranean area, but also in the India, where there the Ganges, in the Ganges, also the what was happening in China at around the same time, and goes basically from the edge of prehistory to about when Constantine becomes converted to Christianity, and that's where she chooses to end her telling of the history, because she says Rome changed into something else once Constantine was converted. So, really enjoyed this book. If you want like a general overview of our history, I think it's a really good survey. Definitely gives you topics that you can definitely dive deeper into. It was just really interesting hearing about like the Assyrians, the Sumerians, what was going on in China and India, because it was kind of neglected. At least I feel in the West when it comes to talking about earlier civilizations. So this was a really great book. I really enjoyed it, and probably listen to it again at some point if I just bored and just need something to kind of listen to. The next book that I read was The New Confessions of the Economic Hitman by Scott Perkins. The shocking story of how America really took over the world. And this basically just talks, is this guy's kind of autobiography. This is autobiography in a way. And he talks about his job, how he worked for a prestigious engineering company, and how he would go to different countries and basically he would convince them to take loans from the International Monetary Fund or other outside organizations in order to basically do all this development. And generally, the only people who profited from this were the people he was in direct contact with, so the people in the country, generally the politician he was dealing with or their underlings, uh, and then of course the American companies that would be brought in like his to actually work on those projects, and then the country would get into a lot of debt, and then of course at that point he said that you kind of could control what was going on in that country because they were in debt. So this was a very interesting read. Basically talks about how he went from doing that job to his conscience kind of getting to him. And yeah, so this was a really interesting story. It talks about how he basically he worked for this job for a really long time. Basically his conscience was kind of bothering him because he knew what he was doing was wrong, and how he kind of got out of that and is now doing other stuff. And so it was a really interesting read. I found some really interesting stuff to think about. He also talks about what he mentions that this is not only happening in other countries, but also happening here in the U.S., where corporations are basically just going out for money and not really caring how general population is being affected, and basically give some tips on how you can also uh, uh, help stop that process in your own little way. So that was a pretty good book. The next book that I read was The Creature from Jekyll Island, a second look at the Federal Reserve by I think G. Edward Griffin, if I'm not mistaken. And this book is basically, I would put it in the like conspiracy theory section of the bookstore. It could be that he could be 100% right, but yeah. So basically, this book talks about the Federal Reserve, the fact that it is, in his opinion, and he has a lot of sources from which he draws information from, is not a good thing for the United States. Basically, big banks are using it kind of and its mechanisms in a way to go about making money, and then when they fail, have the American taxpayer basically push the bill and bail them out, and bailouts, and through devaluing the dollar, so basically inflation. And so it was interesting to read. I don't agree with all the conclusions in this book. He kind of totally dismisses global warming as just a ploy to kind of as a social engineering ploy, but there's some interesting things said in this book about the Federal Reserve, and just quite a interesting for me, something interesting that's not what I normally read. So that was quite interesting, looking to the financial system and the money and how it works and things like that. The next book that I read was The War of the Roses, The Fall of the Plantagenets and the Rise of the Tudors by Dan Jones, and that is exactly what it is. It's a history of the time in England where you had the houses of Lancaster and York kind of going at each other. It basically talks about how it got to that and then how it basically all ended up with Tudors being on the throne, and it was a good book about the period. It got a bit dry at times, but Dan Jones did a good job at kind of giving you all the ins and outs of how this period basically unfolded. You kind of have a weak king in Henry VI, and you have these two houses that are, in his opinion, are just trying to make sure that England is stable, and in trying to ensure that they are the ones doing it, they kind of have to keep the other guys out, and so kind of have this battle for the throne to keep England stable. And in fact, they just kind of end up destabilizing everything, and it's kind of this back and forth of who's on the throne. It doesn't really end until Henry VII comes along, and then you get the start of the Tudor dynasty. So this was a very good read as well. And since I read this book, I decided to read 4 Shakespeare plays. So I read Henry VI, parts 1 through 3, and also Richard III. And basically, they cover much of what was covered in Dan Jones' book. Basically, Henry the Sixth, the 3 parts basically start from when England's at war with France, to the arrival of Joan of Arc, how England basically bounces back from getting beaten by Joan of Arc. Henry VI is crowned, but he's kind of weak. So over the next 2 parts 2 and 3, you kind of see everything fall apart. You see them begin to lose land in France, because at one time England owned about half of France, and kind of just evolve into this back and forth where they're just killing each other over this throne. And then by Richard III, that's how Richard III, the Yorks have the crown, and Richard III is basically planning and scheming to take the throne from his brother and his sons, because his brother had 2 sons, Edward and Richard as well. And basically Tudors come in at the end, and well, that's that. So these were pretty good. Not as good, in my opinion, not as good as the Shakespeare tragedies that I've read. Not as good as and the ones that I've read, Titus Andronicus, Coriolanus, Julius Caesar, and not as good as the comedy Twelfth Night, but they were pretty good plays. But I would say that the other books I've read have been better. And then another book that I read was Illuminae. I read this as an audiobook. The actors did a really good job with this book. This is a sci-fi young adult fiction book, basically about this girl Katie and her boyfriend. Katie's a hacker, really good at what she does. They're teenagers, and basically their colony that they're on, which is a illegal mining colony, is attacked by another corporation, her and her boyfriend are actually able to escape the attack, but then the company doesn't want anyone to find out about it, so the refugees are basically being chased down by this warship. And so that is like most of the story, and then there's some other stuff in there I don't want to reveal, so if you read the story you kind of can get the gist of it. I don't want to spoil anything, but this book was okay for me. I felt that there were some plot choices. Well, I felt there have been some other choices that could have been made by the author that could have been better. But so I won't be continuing the series, but I would say it was an okay read. Next, I read Batman, The New 52, Court of Owls, Volume 1, by Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, and Jonathan Grappion. And I talked about this and the other graphic novel I read, Isola, by Brendan Fletcher and Carl Kerschel, in my graphic novel, in my video on my graphic novels that I've been currently reading. So you can go and look at that video for more detailed review of them there. They were both good, I will say that. This one absolutely excellent, and this one was pretty good. And last but not least, I read the 3rd part of Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. For me, it's split up into 12 parts as an audiobook. They're about like 9 to 10 hours each, and so the 3rd part basically covers Constantine's rise to power, how he came to power, from the 4 emperors and Caesars that there were before. It comes to power, basically his successors, his immediate successors taking over, and also how Christianity kind of evolves and grows over this time after Constantine makes them the official religion of the empire, and basically says no more persecution of Christians. And also, I have yet to finish the English in the history. I haven't read anything. I am going to start reading it tonight, though, after I put up this video and finish editing the other ones. I meant to start last night, but I just got really tired. So I will actually start physically reading this book. I kind of want to get a good chunk of it done in May, if possible, but we'll see about that. Also, I almost forgot. I also read The Thing Around Your Neck by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This was really good. I'm going to do a full review of this. Now, I've said this before and actually haven't done it, but I actually already have shot and already have the pre-edit done for the book review of The Thing Around Your Neck. So I'm not going to talk about that here. You can look out for that video either, I think, next week. If all my videos, I think next week. You should probably be able to have that done next week, because I should be finished editing it tonight. So yeah, keep a lookout for that. That'll be my first official solo review of a book. So yeah, so that's what I read in April. Tell me what was your favorite book of April, and your least favorite if you have one, and let me know down in the comment section below. Yeah, so if you like this video, please hit the like button. If you want to see more videos from me, please subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at GhostReads28, and also on Goodreads. The link to that is down in the description box below. And as always, keep reading.